All right, our objectives today is to describe the relationship between the lymphatic system and the cardiovascular system. So we'll be reviewing what we learned yesterday about the cardiovascular system and about the blood vessels, the artery, well, specifically the capillaries. And then we'll identify 6 parts of the lymphatic system and describe their functions. Notes that the lymphatic system is the group of organs and tissues that collect excess waste fluid and return it to your blood. So if you notice, it travels throughout your body. And this just shows you the big lymph vessels, but they get smaller and they go throughout your body. And they collect excess fluid from your blood, and they clean it out, they filter it, and then they return it to your blood. So it's a way of filtering your blood. Well, yeah, one way of filtering your blood. You have another organ in your body that filters blood, the kidneys, but they do a different thing when they filter it. The lymphatic system is filtering out germs, bacteria, viruses, those sorts of things. So they're filtering out foreign invaders, things that shouldn't be there. Oh, and while we're on this picture, I think this is the only time we see this picture. You should have this picture on your page. You need a label. Okay, so we start our journey at the top with the tonsils. So the tonsils are in the back of your throat. They are behind your back teeth. And then you have the thymus. Oops. The thymus is in your chest. Your thymus actually, as you grow older, it starts to shrink and go away. But it produces special white blood cells there. The spleen is in your left side underneath your stomach. You have lymph nodes throughout. All these green, they're always described as bean-shaped masses, are called lymph nodes, and they are concentrated in your neck, your armpits, your groin, your elbows, and your knees. Some of them, but there's where some are concentrated, and then throughout there, connecting the lymph nodes is lymphatic vessels, just like blood vessels, but they're not filled with blood. They're filled with a tissue called lymph. Okay, so when you discuss this relationship with the lymphatic system and the cardiovascular system, what we see here in this picture are capillaries. We see blood capillaries. The blue and the red are the blood capillaries. And the yellow are lymph capillaries. Are capillaries really big or really small?
Tiny.
They're tiny. They're microscopic. Raise your hand and tell me, where do your capillaries go to? They all have to reach
The fingertip or the tips.
what tiny structures do they all have to travel to? Cells. Thank you. So this is like a cellular level type of picture. In fact, you can see some cells in here. I'll find a different color here. Green. Okay, we have a cell. Oopsie daisy. Here. We have a cell here. The cells are here. So these are the cells, and those capillaries, the blood capillaries, supply the cells with blood. Raise your hand if you remember from yesterday what is so special about blood. What's in blood? Tannen?
Oxygen.
Oxygen for one. Nutrients. Water.
And waste.
And waste. So your blood vessels are gonna deliver the oxygen, water, and nutrients, and take away wastes and what other gas? Carbon dioxide, and any extra water. Okay? While they're there, the lymph vessels interact with the capillaries. The lymph vessels are not interacting with the cells. They're interacting with the capillaries. So they're intertwined with the blood capillaries. Do you see how they are intertwined here? What happens is both the lymph vessels or capillaries and the blood capillaries are very thin. Like the walls of the capillaries are very thin. That something, have we talked about diffusion before?
Yeah.
I think we did that egg experiment and we saw water coming in and out of the eggs.
Yeah.
So the walls of these capillaries are so thin that not only can water go through them, but other things can travel through them. And so that lymph is going to take the blood and take extra fluid from the blood, and it's going into the lymph vessel, and it's going to clean it out. So inside that lymph vessel is lymph. You don't have a place for lymph? So lymph is just a type of fluid, and lymph contains WBCs. Do you guys remember what that stands for? Jenna?
White blood cells.
White blood cells. And one of the white blood cells is called lymphocytes. So that's going to be a major one in the lymphatic system. And so those lymphocytes are going to go through the blood and look for bad stuff. And if there is bad stuff, it's going to eat it up like Pac-Man. So if we have, let's see here, bad guy's going to be black.
Max, you know how to make it seem like your side.
And we're going to make the lymphocyte green. So if it finds something bad, it's just going to eat it up and gobble it up. And oh, you can't see that black very well, can you? And it's just going to gobble it up. So keeps you healthy. Questions? All right, other parts of the lymphatic system. This says that bone marrow is the soft tissue inside of your bones. It is where most red and white blood cells, including lymphocytes, are produced. So we talked about bone marrow when we talked about the bones, and we talked about it making red blood cells, but we did not talk about it making white blood cells. And those white blood cells, those lymphocytes, are those white blood cells. So those are produced in bone marrow inside the bones, and then they go into the lymph tissue. And then that lymph fluid will go to lymph nodes. And lymph nodes are tiny, bean-shaped masses of tissue that remove pathogens and dead cells from the lymph. So they are areas where there's a higher concentration of lymphocytes, the Pac-Man guys, where they're going to be actively eating the bad things. Okay? In the lymph nodes. Okay, that's not the only place in the lymphatic system where this happens, though. That's one place. And when your lymph nodes are actively attacking a bunch of really bad stuff, like if you have an infection, they might get swollen. If you ever go to the doctor's office and they give you a physical examination, one thing they're going to do is check your lymph nodes in your neck. And they're going to feel there to see if anything is tender and see if it's swollen. And if it is, that might indicate that you have an infection somewhere. And the lymph nodes themselves, I think, can get infected. This word pathogens, do you guys know what that means?
Like, disease type thing?
It could be something that causes disease or
Bacteria.
infection. Yeah, it could be bacteria or viruses, any type of like foreign invader, any bad guy, anything that's not supposed to be there. Have you guys, right, other parts of the lymphatic system, there's the thymus and the spleen. You can just be listing these. Yeah, it looks like for number 2, made of. So we should have already had tonsils in there probably. Thymus and the spleen. The thymus I showed you, or you can see in your picture, is in your chest. It produces special white blood cells called T cells. So those are one of like the 5 types of white blood cells. So I'll just make a note here. That's a white blood cell. And then your spleen is the largest lymphatic organ. It stores and produces lymphocytes. So we also said that bone marrow makes lymphocytes, so your spleen makes them too. Does anybody know what's special, or I don't know if special's the right word, about your spleen? Why and when doctors might find it important to keep an eye on your spleen? If you get really sick, especially with mono, your spleen could get enlarged and really swollen, and it would be really sensitive. So if you have mono, they'll tell you not to do, like, stay away from contact sports or big physical activity, especially if your spleen gets swollen, because if your spleen gets swollen and something hits it, it could rupture, and that would be really bad, and all of that tissue and stuff could seep out into other parts of your body. And so now, could you get these organs removed and still live? Could you get your tonsils removed?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you get your spleen removed?
No.
You actually could. Your thymus, you can get all of these removed, but every time you get something removed for the lymphatic system, you're just taking away another level of security in your body, or fighting immunity. Well, that's a good question. Some people's tonsils get really swollen and make it hard to breathe and swallow, and some people get tons and tons of tonsil infections, and so doctors might just say it's time to get these removed. There's also an organ similar to your tonsils that are behind your nose called the adenoids, and those have a similar function, and those might make people snore or something if they get swollen, and blocks breathing. So those can get removed as well. You're definitely okay not to have them, but your tonsils are your first line against defense, because a lot of that bacteria comes in through your mouth. You might breathe it in, or it might be something you eat. Okay, so speaking of tonsils, here they are. Make sure they're listed if you haven't already done so. There's the lymphatic tissue in the nasal cavity at the back of the mouth on either side of the tongue. So you have 2 tonsils. They help defend the body against infection. So here would be maybe normal size. Well, actually, that's kind of big. No, it says inflamed. Okay, so, and some people's, they might get even bigger. And they could get red, they can get white, you might get white spots on them. And that could be for 2 reasons. The white spots might be infection, or it might be food that gets stuck in there, because some of the tonsil tissue is what they say is pitted. There's pits in them, like deep grooves where food can get stuck, and that stuck food could look like white spots. And if you just gargle with salt water, some of that might come dislodged. But if you do have inflamed tonsils, which, by the way, it's called inflamed tonsils. So what do we call that condition when you have inflamed tonsils? Tonsillitis. If you have tonsillitis, there's things you can do at home before you go to the doctor, because the doctor's only going to give you antibiotics if there's an actual infection. But if your tonsils are giving you a problem, gargling with salt water, gargling with lemon juice, drinking hot tea with honey, those types of things help your throat. Taking ibuprofen reduces the swelling if you're able to do that. So, and like I said, some people get these removed, and there's a procedure where they just get, you just go away. Okay? Any questions?